Welcome to Topline, the podcast for the best founders, operators, and investors in B2B tech. Every week, AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman, and me, Sam Jacobs, will break down what's important for you to know to be the most well-informed professionals in the market.
67% of sellers say they've watched deals slip away because they couldn't deliver the specific customer evidence their buyers needed. That's why this episode is sponsored by User Evidence, the customer evidence platform trusted by GTM teams at Gong, Ramp, Grammarly, and more. In their latest report based on findings from over 600 B2B buyers, sellers, and marketers, they reveal exactly what kind of customer proof builds trust and gets deals done. For all of the findings, download the Evidence Gap report now at userevidence.com/evidence.
Hi, everyone. It's Sam Jacobs, reporting from a hotel room somewhere on Eastern Long Island. You're listening to Topline. I'm the CEO of Pavilion. I'm joined by my co-host, Asad Zaman, the CEO of STA, and AJ Bruno, the CEO of QuotaPath. Gentlemen, start your engines.
Sam, welcome back. We missed you last week. Well, I missed you.
I haven't even listened to the episode. How was it? Did you have a lot of Easter eggs? Did you make fun of me? Did you mock my ancestry?
We would never do that. Any of those things.
You'd have to tune in to find out.
Indeed.
Asad was spitting fire. He's had like 4 weeks in a row where he is on a tear.
Do we think Asad is our Stevie Nicks? He's about to go solo. Is Asad our Beyonce?
He's got a little Beyonce in him.
We're Destiny's Child, AJ. They're never going to remember us, you and me.
We all love Kelly Rowland. I'm on painkillers today, so I'm going to be a bit slow.
Yeah.
Did you go to the doctor?
Not yet.
We were all together actually just yesterday, and 2 days ago I got in and Asad is limping to say hello to me, and I'm like, "What? Oh man, crazy cricket football match?" No, he fell down the stairs.
Well, we found out when we were all together that Asad is like Sam Jackson and Unbreakable. He's Mr. Glass, and he has very brittle bones, and anything might cause or impair his ability to function properly. And we're a little worried about him, to be completely.
We get through it. It's not as encumbering. Is that the word? I don't even know words.
I think encumbering is a good word. You can use it.
Okay. Well, it's not as encumbering as it should be.
Fair enough. We did just spend a couple of days together on a retreat. We had a great time, and we drew a lot of conclusions, and we made a lot of business decisions that we're all really excited about. We had a 13-course tasting menu prepared by our friend Brandon Barton, the CEO of Byte. It was delicious. And now we're back to record our hot takes on what's happening in the go-to-market ecosystem. And Asad Zaman is the master of ceremonies of the docket, the MCD. Not to be confused with MCP, Model Context Protocol. Asad found a way to use vector database in every other sentence at this point. He's very much on technology.
That was good. Okay. We have some really interesting stuff to discuss. The first one is about switching costs. So if you remember, a few months ago, one of the conversations we were having is that a lot of the fundamentals of the SaaS era were based on this idea that you would sign a customer on, and then you could keep this customer for a very long time. And part of that was because it was really hard. Like, even though maybe that's not the first reason people would give, one of the reasons was that it's really hard to move off these large platforms. The switching costs, as well as the burden, the amount of hours, tension, pressure was always quite significant. So an example is if you want to leave Salesforce, it's not easy. And if you're a large company, an ERP, HCM, CRM shift is very, very difficult. So we were talking about how maybe AI will make it easier to switch. Maybe AI will do some of that heavy lifting. Maybe it'll do it for really cheap. And basically in the last week, we have heard a lot about this. And so if you look at the cloud today, 50% of workloads are on the cloud, which means 50% of the workloads are not on the cloud. They're on some type of a hybrid model or old school on-premise databases. So A big reason for this is the difficulty of shifting from Microsoft or Oracle databases over to something else. And so what's happening right now is there's an extra incentive to want to shift to the cloud because that's how you can use AI really well. And so Databricks and Snowflake have created these AI tools that they're giving to these customers that's making the transfer a lot easier. That's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So months of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars of spend is now days and weeks and a fraction of it. But they're not alone. Microsoft, Salesforce, Palantir, they have created these agents to help each other's customers leave from one to the other. And the people who published this, the information wrote about both of these, they went and spoke to some of the customers, and the customer sentiment is that, wow, this is exciting because I have more leverage to go and negotiate right now. If it's so easy for me to leave Salesforce, maybe Salesforce will have to be more aggressive with discounting to keep me. And so that's the state of the situation today. AJ, if switching costs and the burden of switching is quickly approaching zero, which is what it is. In some cases, they're just giving these things away to them.
It might even it might not even be zero. It might be negative because they might pay you to switch.
They might pay you to switch. You are right. So if let's say they'll pay you to switch, or it'll cost you nothing to switch, what does that mean for this technology landscape as you look at it going forward? We'll talk about what it means for SaaS, but what does it mean moving forward?
Do either of you remember or have heard about Kubernetes?
Yeah.
Do you know what that is? Sam?
I hear Bill Gurley say Kubernetes all the time, and I nod to imply to other people that are listening, I totally know what Kubernetes are.
Well,
I'm going to choose not to answer your question.
for preservation of, I understand why. So Kubernetes is a container orchestration system. Well, what does that mean? It means that if you're on AWS, if you're on Google Cloud, GCP, if you're on Azure, if you're on anything, you can take and containerize your app and deploy it anywhere to the cloud. And I remember when this came out in 2015 and 2016, at the time we were at AWS, we were like, oh, switching costs are negative. And now we can go anywhere we want to. And guess where we were 5 years later?
AWS.
Oh my goodness, Sam, how did you get it? Ding, ding, ding. So I'm skeptical, very highly skeptical, Asad.
Interesting.
And the reason for that is, and this is even more skeptical than I would be. First off, Databricks has to rely on a lot of open source tools to be able to do this. The foundation, open source itself, Databricks itself is built on open source tech, like Apache
Why
Spark.
does it have to rely on open source? Why can't it just build its own agent that it gives somebody that takes their data, puts it here?
The architecture behind these things is very, very complex because you're solving for systems at scale. It's not just a Salesforce. It's not just an ERP. You have a lot of things that this touches. And the migration path to do this, which AI can help with, for sure, is only like 75% of the way there. The last 25%, that last mile, it's like building an app in Replit or Lovable or whatever. It is the heavy lifting comes actually in that last mile. And so the thought, if I'm an engineer, if I'm RevOps or I'm whatever, the thought of even starting to do a migration, it's like switching gyms. No one wants to do that. What? So I'm super negative that this is like going to be a thing at scale for these companies.
This is very interesting. Sam, how do you, what's your reaction to this entire situation as well as what AJ just said?
Sam's going to agree with me. Here we go.
I mean, I don't agree with AJ, but I definitely think, I don't agree that it's going to cause some sea change, because I still think that switching costs are not just about where the data is stored. It's also about security and
knowledge transfer,
information architecture, and relationships, and even the myth of the impossibility of data transfer, even if the actual workloads that are required to move from AWS to GCP or to move off of Databricks to Snowflake, it might be true mechanically that it's easy, but it might also be true that institutionally it's still very, very hard at large enterprises. So, but I think where this plays out is really in the middle market and the SMB space, because I think there you would still expect, for example, somebody that we know really well runs is the CRO for a customer support platform, and that's an example where you would imagine that switching costs are also quite high because same thing, data storage, because of the way that integrations work, because of workflow management. And I think at the SMB level, switching costs on the margin will go down as they have. I don't think it's just because of what we're talking about as it relates to, Snowflake and Databricks. I also think it just relates to the world and the age of APIs, where everything is connected and information can flow both ways, not just into a new system, but out of a new system. I guess fundamentally what I think is on the margin, CAC will continue to go up and LTV will go down. And it'll make it much, when I hear this, which is what I told you offline, Asad, what I hear is just continued erosion on the core assumptions that underpin SaaS go-to-market motions. And as a reminder, those go-to-market motions are predicated on we're willing to spend a lot to acquire a customer because we have high confidence that they'll stay with us for a very long time, and we can have that customer acquisition cost paid back because of high gross margin contribution over 5, 6, 7 years of a relationship. And I don't think that means that every relationship is going to 1 year or 2 years. I don't think people like switching that much, but I do think that on the margin, there will be erosion on LTV at the same time that competition and noise make CAC increasingly expensive. And I think those two factors interplaying together mean that higher CAC and lower LTV will put a lot of pressure on businesses that are trying to go to market. I think the other thing we've talked about, Asad, is that product market fit is not a static state, it's a dynamic state, and it moves around, and it can move around depending on the dynamics of the market. So what I think is that on the margin, that there are many SaaS businesses or cloud-based applications with seat-based pricing or even usage-based pricing, but where they assume their lock-in with their customer is deeper than it actually is. And on the margin, meaning on the outer edges, like deep in the enterprise, deep in the Department of Defense, are people going to all of a sudden move off of Palantir to something else? No, I don't think they are. But on the margins, in the outer rims of like this lock-in cloud, if you can imagine at the center of it is very large enterprises like the government, and on the outer edges are SMB. I think the outer edges of SMB, LTV to CAC will continue to get compressed, and that'll push an increasing percentage of companies out of product market fit and into distress.
That's
Well,
really.
hold on. I'm gonna have a couple quick questions here for you, Sam, because what
if I don't have the answer?
What if I refuse?
What if I refuse?
In the process, I'll just redirect.
What if some of them are not your business? So if I can just keep acting silly, I can delay the asking of the question. Run out of time.
You might forget.
Tough questions here. Databricks, who are the customers? Their primary customers? Enterprises.
Large-scale enterprises.
Large-scale enterprises. And Sam, you just said for mid-market SMB, and you talked about LTV to CAC and went through those numbers. That's great, but let's put this into perspective. You both have Verizon or AT&T when you're well, actually, I don't even know. Maybe neither of you have either.
I'm still on Verizon.
You're still on Verizon. How long have you been on Verizon?
Years and years.
What's your switching cost for that?
0.
Yeah, and it's a commodity.
That doesn't work, AJ, because what's the marginal benefit to switch, right? This is an equation where the switch only makes sense if what you can get is significantly better. So the other side of this is that if you are a company that is competing in a category, building things is becoming easier. You come up with something that is genuinely a 10x improvement on something. The type of velocity you can unlock in the enterprise in that situation is significant at that point, right? Because there is a significant benefit to move. Whereas when you're moving providers, phone providers, what's the difference? Like, it's the same shit.
Yeah, I think there's some specific examples where you're right, but this isn't necessarily AI. That's always been true. There are things that are 10x better that come. We all switched to
But
Slack.
AI is
10x
making the
better.
switch better, right? Because if, let's say, Palantir was better than something else, right? Like you buying Foundry from them was better than whatever else they were doing before. The burden of making that move, the amount of human hours it would take, the capacity you would dedicate to it, the cost associated with it. When you are an organization that's budgeting out your next year, planning out your next year, like maybe this is not a next year thing. This is a 2 years from now thing. We know we should do it, but we have all these other competing priorities. And so maybe not right now. We'll do it a bit later. But if you now do that same calculation and say, oh, this thing, we know we need it, and it's going to take a quarter of the effort from a cost and from a human capacity and hours perspective, I think that changes the equation for a lot of people. And so I would agree with Sam that I think the near-term benefit will be greatly seen in the mid-market. I think we are also underappreciating how unready, if that's the word, how not ready large enterprises are to leverage AI today, because there's some clients we work with today whose primary job is to work with a Fortune 50 company that's dying to leverage AI, but cannot because of the archaic way in which they are keeping their data today. So this company's primary job is to go in and fix your data up so that you can actually use AI. And that's why OpenAI has created a consulting practice. They're using forward deployed engineers. Anthropic is doing the same thing. And so I think what's happening is that we are already noticing that it is changing the pace at which companies of all sizes move. The biggest benefits at the enterprise will take some time to be seen, but you can already see some. So it's like that the momentum has started. It's going to pick up. It's not like this won't have an impact. This will change things, is how I think about it.
I think there's pieces of this that are right, but for this to be true, especially for these bigger enterprises, AI is going to have to deliver a massive step function of improvement to justify
that is off. Yeah.
And that's where we're talking about this in a future state, which I appreciate. And if I had read the information article, I'm sure that's what it would have said. But Asad knows that I went to read
AJ is the cheapster and refuses to pay for subscriptions.
Subscribe for the information just yet, but I will after today's episode. But that we're thinking about this in a future state where the migration tools are going to be set up.
I think you have to look at everything today with a future state in mind. And so think of it like this, maybe, that let's tie two things together. Did you guys see the news about RAM?
Yes, that they just raised another X million at a $22 billion valuation in the private market.
$22 billion.
It was 17 billion before.
And that was like a few months ago.
A few months ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And this company is, I think, less than 5 years old in an extremely competitive category. And it's not like they want incumbent options and all tie-in and all of that stuff. But what this company has achieved is it makes you really think. And I think the combination of examples like this that show that you can enter a really saturated market, or one that we think is saturated, and you can out execute people and do something like this. And then you start looking at the fact that a lot of startups were afraid to target upper mid-market enterprise at the onset. Long cycles, it's tougher to win. You start with smaller deals, move up. I think you see more people being like, let's go after the upper mid-market enterprise. I think the confidence as a builder that you can, like, if I have something that's 10x better, I can make it seamless. I can pay them to move, as Sam said. I think that changes the software dynamic a little bit.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think Ramp, when AI really started to kick off, I remember in 2022 when they had an $8 billion valuation, they went all in on it and talked about how they were building products through it. Whether that's part of their valuation or not, I don't know. What I do know is true is Ramp has created a fantastic business model and has built off of that business model. I would watch for Rippling in the future state to have, it's a different market, obviously, but have a very similar valuation.
Is Ramp just expense management?
No, Ramp started as expense management, but it has gone like full horizontal as a platform and what it does, ACH, bill. I mean, it's ultimately, I think, has a payment processing part of it, right? And the computer start.
We get paid through Ramp on it. I mean, I'm just curious because I don't equate Ramp with AI. I don't assume that the reason Ramp is growing so fast is because of AI, but I could be wrong. And that's why I'm actually confused at how they're growing so fast, exactly to the point, because it does feel like there's so many different competitors. If I'm looking at, it's just a completely anecdotal, reflection, which is how Pavilion gets paid. We get paid by Ramp, we get paid by Build.com. We get paid by like 50 different sort of like payment, AP management solutions, expense management stuff. And I just think it's fascinating that Navan/Trip Actions was also in the space, but it feels like Ramp has dramatically surpassed them, even though Navan is going public, or has gone.
There's Brex, there's there was Divvy that was bought by Bill.com, which we used. I mean, there's the big one for years, Expensify, that got completely destroyed. That was trading just a few months ago at 1x revenue.
1x, wow.
Yeah, I know.
This raise of theirs was probably the most AI raise that they have done, because I think the big premise for this raise is that the future of finance broadly is a lot of AI agents doing some of the grunt work that finance teams would do. So let's say you're reviewing an expense. Why is a human reviewing an expense?
Financial controls, approvals, compliance.
Exactly. And so they've got this vision for what the future finance team looks like. And I actually think this was I think Ramp's marketing is probably one of the best I have seen. And the sign of that for me is like how much love and care they put into copywriting for all of their announcements and their ads and all of that stuff. It really is inspiring to see. But in this announcement, they really elegantly showed what they think the future finance team looks like. And the combination of humans who I think play that, Sam, you talked about orchestration, the human orchestration layer, and then the agents under them. And they want to go build these agents out. And so they raised this money to be able to do that.
Well, if you think about that, Asad, it makes sense, right? We talk about commissions being a little defensible from AI in the sense that that's a sensitivity, it's payroll. Financials have something similar, but they're much more scaled. So the AI piece of it is really about like detecting fraud or transactions that might not be detectable by a human being.
I think this is the big question mark for all agents of all sorts, but I think this would be the big question that we will find out with companies like Ramp, is that it will take some time for AI to get to a point where it doesn't have hallucinations. Like, it's not a tomorrow solution that's coming forward. The models will get really powerful, by the way. Like, I think GPT-5 is going to be very, very impressive.
And I think GPT-5, or they already announced that it's going to be GPT-5, and I missed that.
They've been talking about it now.
Okay.
When you say, by the way, Asad, putting aside any of like the benchmark tests and reading press releases about how GPT-5 beat this test or that test, if you're evaluating model quality, do you have a prompt that you use across every model to say, oh, that's a better answer? When you're thinking about, quote unquote, a model being impressive, are you referencing, this isn't I'm not being passive aggressive, are you referencing like you read a press release that says, oh, on this benchmark it did better? Or are you saying for every new model, I ask it like, what my fashion choices should be, or what's the square root of pi, or how should I design STA as a business to 100 million in revenue with 80 million of EBITDA? Like, you have like a series of prompts that you use to check, or because I don't. So that's why I'm curious.
I think that's a really good question. It's a combination. I find that AI is not as useful in my day-to-day as like it might be for other people. Like, I actually, like, it hasn't changed my life. Like, it hasn't. I would be kind of okay without it. It's made some things better, some things faster, some things a lot more fun. But it isn't
a good thing, by the way. I actually I appreciate that you're coming out and saying that, because everyone wants to be this, oh my goodness, it's so life-changing. But
yeah, it hasn't been life-changing for me. I've had some moments where I'm like, oh, that's really sweet. Like my mom talking to AI about a real a challenge that somebody in the family was having with mental health, and she wanted to understand it. And I just heard her in her room, like cutely talking to AI. That was one of the most beautiful things I've seen. Because this is like a 70-something-year-old from Pakistan who was like on voice mode, like this was a year ago. And I was like, that's really cool. Like the adoption with my parents is like, they use it as much as we do, by the way. They use it that much. And it's like, and they want like emailing all the time. And, they want the most tech savvy people. So I've had some beautiful situations with it that I've seen, but it hasn't changed my life in a very dramatic manner. What I can see is that every time the models they announce new models, and I find that Claude and OpenAI are used for different things, you see incremental improvements. So I do find that I do use deep research a lot, and O3 Pro's deep research reports were way more usable for me than O1. Like I did, and because I do so much research for our newsletter, that's probably the cleanest way for me to understand if one thing is working better than the other. Is like how much more am I going to do in terms of research versus these promptings that I'm doing on OpenAI. And now I find that with O3, I have to go Google almost never. I do have to validate stuff, but it's really powerful there. And with Claude, I noticed that I use Claude a lot for titles for newsletters, right? Like I think it's really good at that. It's better than I am. My skill is in titles. And I found that the latest model with reasoning added to it was like, it would give me 10 things and I could combine 2 of them and make a good one. Whereas before I had to go through like 100 and eventually I would just write my own. So that's like one way of looking at it. The other is these benchmarks. Is like you look at these benchmarks and you say, okay, how much hallucination is happening and what complexity of tasks can it do? Because what we're trying to not answer is like how best to use it today. I think the most interesting question is what does company building, what do our companies look and feel like in 2020? That's a really interesting question.
In 2020?
Yeah, 2020 or 2025, choose a year, like within that bracket of 2020 to 2030. What does the world look like?
We're in 2025.
Sorry, 2030. This is where my medicine.
We know what companies look like in 2020. That was 5 years ago. We live in the future, everybody.
This is where your brain goes crazy. So in 2030, if you look at what a business looks like, well, I think that's a really interesting question. And you have to then look at these type of tests and extrapolate out a bit to be able to envision that. And so you combine these 2 methods, I think.
I certainly think that there's a couple points that have been made in the news and the press recently. One of them is that I've seen a few headlines where the people say AI commits has written 20 to 30% of our code. And then you cross-reference that against increased productivity. And it turns out that the code contributions are typically outweighed by bugs, revisions, and rewriting of crap code that the AI has contributed. And so it's true that on a, ball bearing measurement, meaning like pure widgets produced, that AI is producing 30% of the total code, but that the percent of that code that is usable or that requires oversight is so high that the net productivity gains are 0, sometimes even negative, meaning you're better off if you just had human writing the whole time because you're spending so much time checking the errors of the AI. I do think that will go down, but I think that it's important that we recognize, I think the companies of the future will have systems that are cross-referencing each other to enable large-scale QA from single orchestrators. And I think that that'll be different work. I don't think we'll be 10 times as productive. I think we'll be 50 to 60% more productive than we currently are, which is still very significant. But I do think that most of what everybody will be doing will be QAing agent output, understanding that depending on the agent, the context, the workflow, there might be more or fewer errors as a consequence of all of that.
Sam, on that, so what you just said, there's actually a lot of data now coming out around this. So they did a study with developers and they found that developers expected that using Cursor or Claude would make them 24% faster at these development tasks. And after they were done with these tests that they were running, they thought we did this 20% faster than we would have actually done it if we were doing this without AI. But in reality, using the AI made them 19% slower on average,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. Like it's so interesting. Do you think the future job that you're defining of like we're doing a lot of QAing and auditing and prompt, is that a more fun job or is that a more boring job?
I do think it's more fun because I think the canvas of tasks and jobs to be done against which you're doing that QA is much broader. And if you like, so for example, we're hiring a billing and collections analyst right now. And I interviewed her yesterday. I interviewed a candidate yesterday. Now, what is that job today or 2 years ago? That job today or 2 years ago is a lot of just calling people and sending automated emails saying, hey, your credit card failed. Now, the job today is a little bit more complicated because you can design custom workflows based on the failure reason. And ultimately, you should be able to get the card failure rate down from where it currently is, which for us is very, very high. In the future, I think that job becomes probably more interesting because it becomes not just a billing analyst, but like a pure FP&A number 2. I don't think we're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 people in our finance department. I think we're going to have at maximum 2. We might have like an outsourced accounting firm that does our books. But I told the person I was interviewing, like, there's not going to be any more people. So if you're interested in like building a team, this is not going to be the right role for you. This is going to be the right role if you are helping us load up Giraffe or some kind of FP&A planning software like Abacum that I guess our friend Julio runs. If you're like loading in Abacum and Bill.com and ChargeBee or some kind of Recurly or Zora plus Stripe, like if you're taking these massive data sets and they're all connected by one integrated AI chat interface, and you can query this data in new and interesting ways, almost like a BI tool, in a manner that you weren't able to before. I think that actually is a nominally more interesting job than it is today.
Are you ready to level up your go-to-market strategy for 2026? Then don't miss GTM 2025, the only B2B tech conference exclusively for go-to-market executives. Join 1,000 other revenue leaders this September 23rd to 25th in Washington, D.C. for an exclusive executive-only experience. This 3-day event is hyper-focused on connection, strategy, and execution. Expect hands-on workshops, in-depth strategy sessions, and curated opportunities to build relationships with VPs, CXOs, and founders facing the same challenges you are. You'll stress test your GTM approach, align your team, and leave with real, actionable insights from top-performing leaders. Don't miss the must-attend conference designed to help you boost go-to-market results in 2026. Visit attendgtm.com, that is ATTEND.GTM.com to secure your spot today, and don't forget to use the code TOPLINE for 10% off your GA ticket.
AJ, why do you think that something that made a person slower to them felt like it made them faster? That makes it really confusing for me as an operator, because a lot of us are going to tell our divisional heads, use AI in engineering, let's get more productive. And then they don't come back and they've heard from their team, I'm using Chris, it's making me 20% faster. They don't come back to you and be like, AJ, I'm 20% faster. But in reality, that's not the actual situation. And so how do you work through this?
I mean, I think you go back to what we were talking about, which is like, what are the right metrics to start to measure AI coding productivity? Is it the same? Is it the code accuracy? Of course. Is it the bug revision rate? I think that's a big piece of it. Acceptance rate of PRs when these get checked into GitHub and they're reviewed. Is the PR merged? I think these are all things that I know that engineers look at as probably more pains in their workflow versus them just like hands-on keyboard coding. And the question I have is like, if they enjoy coding and they're not coding, then I think it actually goes down. Specifically, QA and QA engineer that's an individual contributor role. that in the engineering world isn't necessarily as desirable. You look at interns that have that, or maybe that's your first job out of school, is doing
It
audit
used to be a
testing.
third party in many cases.
Yeah, sometimes it still is a third party. We do
Here-
unit testing as well.
Here's an insight I want to share with you both. Okay, so first, and maybe there's three. AJ tried to vibe code a Topline website. I think it was in Bolt. It was in Bolt, right, AJ? Maybe it was Replit.
Yeah, it was right after we had Eric on the show.
So we got a wireframe very quickly, and it looked pretty good. And of course, as we've been talking about, the last mile of getting that to production was probably a bridge too far for given the amount of time that we had.
Yes.
Now, you could say, oh, I can build a website very quickly with like a bunch of tiles that link back to like the podcast episode. That's true. Now, you can also do that today anyway, because Squarespace exists and Wix exists.
They have these templates.
And those templates are better, and they are QA tested, and all of the integrations are QA tested. Jason Lemkin famously right now is like talking about, how he wanted to vibe code an app, and he spent hours and hours and hours, and no, he wasn't able to get it to production. And ultimately, here's where he came out. He said the things that you can do vibe coding are basically landing pages and like front page sites, because the data and the data privacy and the security and the data architecture are not something that vibe coding can support right now. And he's like, okay, but you can build a landing page today more easily than with an agent by just, again, using Squarespace, using any marketing automation software, using HubSpot. And you can build a better landing page that's more flexible, that has built-in pixels and cookie trackers and personalization flows and things like that. Last example, I spent, not a long time, a couple of hours. And what I wanted to build, I've talked to you all about it, and, one or two people listening will know what I'm talking about. There was an early point and click video game company called Sierra, and they built a bunch of games that are basically, they're like 2D screens.
Sierra built, by the way, my favorite video game of all time. Sam.
What's that? Oh, yeah. What is that?
NASCAR racing.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
I played these role playing games with text prompts: Space Quest, Police Quest, King's Quest, Leisure Suit Larry.
Yeah, those were all
when I was this is like 85, 86, 87. I was a kid. I was living in India, and there's one person that will really know, but he doesn't listen. His name's Salil Petroda. He lives in LA, and me and Salil would play like Space Quest and Space Quest 2, Valhalla's Revenge, and so I said, okay, vibe coding is an application, this should be something I can vibe code, right? So I created, and it took hours and hours and hours. And then by the end, I was really like spending multiple repetitions with the interface to try and just get like the pixel image, the background image to map to the right dimensions. So here's my point. I then just went into ChatGPT. I said, by the way, are there like other gaming engines I could use to make this easier? They're like, oh yeah, sure. There's 3. Why don't you use Google's Adventure Game Studio? Like you upload, like everything's done for you. And I'm like, I just spent 5 hours on the idea that I was going to recreate from scratch something where there are templates, there are frameworks, there are existing engines. They have been QA'd. And I think so what is my point? I still think the dust has not settled on the core use cases for what all of this technology is really going to be applied to. Because I think we are still figuring out that, there's a Squarespace, there's Adventure Game Studio. Like there are actually templates. We don't need to build everything from scratch. Okay, well, what are the things that we should vibe code? What are these things actually usable for? Because if Bolt has to recreate a Squarespace template with integrated payment processing, when Squarespace has been doing that for 10 years and knows better than anybody how to create a WYSIWYG like drag and drop editor that drops in a payment processor, I probably just want to use Squarespace. So I think there's still this open question of what do we use AI for, especially when it comes to these vibe coding apps, where I feel like, calling that ARR is very, very generous.
The other problematic piece to this is, I don't know who came up with the term vibe coding. One of you two is going to tell
Andre Tripathi.
But I think it's he
was the Tesla AI guy, Open AI guy, Andre Tripathi.
I think it's a really terrible category name. It's an awful category. It like invokes novelty and like, it's a vibe, man. Like it doesn't have commercial like practicality in my mind to it. I don't
But
feel a realness.
I do think we should differentiate between what Cursor is, which isn't vibe coding, or Claude Code isn't
But that's
vibe
the
coding.
problem. It is being thrown in. I mean, Sam literally just used the term vibe coding to describe
Because
one of these.
Replit and Lovable and Bold, which are more that this category is consumers that don't code, and then they can go and do a bunch of fun things, and then developers who can code and the things that can make them faster. There are questions on both sides, right? The data that we shared a little bit earlier on were actual developers doing actual coding tasks within Cursor and Claude, and it was making them slower. Maybe they enjoyed it more. Maybe they're like, the stuff I didn't like doing was done for me, and so it felt faster because I was spending more time having fun, doing enjoyable things, and maybe that's something. And then there's the Lovable Bold examples. I do agree that there are a lot of questions that need to be answered related to that, because something I've been thinking about a lot recently is that if you go back to GPT-1 and 2, the way that they built these models was that they curated the data that went into it very meticulously. And what that allowed was a lot of accuracy in some areas, but the models were not that powerful. And the broadness of the applicability was limited. So then what they did was they said, and this was Dario at when he was at OpenAI, he basically said, when we're training GPT-3, let's take all 10,000 GPUs that we have access to and train one model on them, and let's dump all the data we can find, which was very unconventional at the time. What's going to happen is these models will make more mistakes than before. So now we'll have humans who sit in different parts of the world that we pay a couple of dollars an hour to, that will say cat, not cat, dog, not dog. So that's human reinforcement learning, right? So they'll help these models learn and create guardrails around.
Does that exist right now? I mean, that sounds like a Mechanical Turk situation. Is that the reality of what's happening?
That's the reality. Now it's more advanced than that, but the original human reinforcement learning was literally cat, not cat. When you look at CAPTCHA, right? CAPTCHA, when you're going on a website to sign in and they ask you which one of these are buses.
Yeah.
That is also tied into training a model in the back, by the way.
We're all just being trained. We're all just training.
We are all like actively helping train models as well.
You don't really need to do that anymore. I feel like that's not something that needs to be done. Like pick all the pictures.
The reason I'm bringing this up is now where human reinforcement learning has gotten is people are teaching AI how to use software. So they'll create an instance where they'll train it how to use Salesforce, how to create an account in Salesforce, how to change the status of something, and they'll train the hell out of it for that. So if that's what's going to happen, then won't you just go to OpenAI and give it I want to create a website? As Sam said, you won't go to these vibe coding tools. You'll go to something broader that'll just go and find the best landing page and the best this and the best that. Like it will know how to use all those things and will go do that and then code up the remainder that's missing, versus you would go into something so specific. So I think, Sam, it is a big question mark. And I think for that reason.
I think for me, like, I think I'm sure that they have, so I don't need them. They don't need me to tell them this, but I really am not long-term bullish on Cursor. Well, really, I'm not. Let me say Replit, Lovable, and Bolt, because I think when you zoom out, what'll happen is all of the stuff that your inclination to code will lead you to, you'll realize after a couple of hours that there's already templates and platforms that are much easier to use with higher quality outputs. And then you'll say, okay, well, what am I supposed to use this for? And I don't think that there's an answer to that question yet. And I think the use cases are going to be far more narrow than people think. And this might be true that, you know what, I'm wrong, because Squarespace actually isn't very usable. And, that's the problem with it. But I guess I would still, my instinct would be that of like some dedicated SaaS solution or some dedicated application that layers a chatbot interface onto its data to make its data more accessible. Like Squarespace using an AI prompter is still probably better than trying to build a website completely from scratch using Lovable.
Or OpenAI, like going into ChatGPT and saying, I want to make a website, and it figures out, I'm going to use Squarespace for this. I'm going to do this here. And I can write code to do the thing that I want to do in this website that none of these things are enabling, right? I can write that little piece of code and attach it on. And that's why I think, is it going to be more centralized or dispersed, right? Like, are you going to go sign into Lovable to do something there? Or are you going to stay centralized in this one thing? And the more and more, if you believe these models are going to get very powerful and that OpenAI is going to have a lot of capital to build out its functionality, there is a strong argument to make that probably 70-80% of what you're doing is centralized within one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think there's an argument that what's really needed are like nano agents, like that would be hyper specialized agents that do only one task. And that what OpenAI, it's sort of what Asad's saying. What OpenAI, or what like the big model is doing, is reviewing basically an app store of agents that is a billion different agents, all of them like perfected and highly, highly, highly specialized. Like there's the healthcare pharma connector agent that all it does is it has one snippet of code that connects this solution to that solution. And OpenAI has some like QA layer that it like takes the agent, runs it through a QA layer to make sure like the code checks out. And then it only adds that small little instance, exactly like Asad said. Because what I asked OpenAI or ChatGPT was, are there any game interfaces that I could easily upload a PNG graphic to where the background image is me standing in front of my apartment in Barcelona, but pixelated so it looks like Space Quest or King's Quest? And so it said, yes, here's the 3. Now, the next step from that would be, well, go create the instance. And by the way, ChatGPT already had because I used DALL-E, so like it already had the images I wanted to use. It's like the natural next step would be like, okay, create the background for me. Like, I just want to start playing the game.
Yeah. And wouldn't life be so much more fun in a way if I think about toddle tasks a lot, because I wrote about it, and you switch between all these things throughout the day, and each switch has a burden associated with it. And if you just are in one thing for the majority of your time, like that's kind of interesting and fun. Like that might make it more enjoyable. I heard Jason from All In ask a question of the CEO of AMD. And in that question was this statement of, we can now just agree that we have AGI. And so what we're solving for is superintelligence. Based on the things we've talked about today, AJ, doesn't that sound like a really silly statement that let's just assume, like, of course we have AGI. What do you mean? This is AGI? Like this is the big thing?
It's so hilarious that the CEO of AMD, like the clear loser of the NVIDIA AMD race is
they're cousins.
Who is cousins?
Jensen Huang?
Yes.
Is cousins with the CEO of AMD?
Yeah.
What a fun fact that is.
Yeah.
That family owns this space.
I would say one side of that family is doing much, much better than the other side of that family.
Both are just fine. Trust me.
Hard. I think it's silly to state that. Of course, we all think that that's silly. Like we're stating those things to create some level of debate and discussion around it. But we all know it's like it when you see it kind of feeling. We're not an AGI. That's obviously very clear. And we all know that to be true. So context matters there. I didn't listen to that episode. Asad, was there something more that was...
He was just asking her a question about superintelligence, and they all kind of skipped past this. I just found it annoying that the assumption is that this is AGI. Because like it's fun and it's interesting and it helps you do certain things a lot faster than before, but like it's not life-changing. It's less useful than I think the world makes it out to be. Sometimes I see these very complex things people have put together. They show it on different social medias of using these agent builders to like create a 37 agent step flow to do. And then you're like, what was the task? And it was like something super basic. You're like, all of that to like get a transcript. Really? And I say, okay, that's not AGI then. Like, and it's cool that the person said that's not AGI.
Well, first off, we talked about intelligence as a definition, which there isn't one in the last episode, Asad, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. I think the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that we're trying to contextualize really complex math for the average listener, including us, the three of us. Like the matrix style of how these computations get done are well beyond our understanding, because they're more than the number of grains of sand in the world, which by the way is 42 quintillion. And so like you cannot comprehend. Yeah, I knew that. I went and counted.
I mean, I'm feeling insecure relative to Asad's research too, AJ. But so AJ's like, I'm gonna go figure out how many grains of sand.
This is how I prove my worth on this show.
It's very valuable. Thank you. I'm gonna do something with that
I love that.
If you're out there listening and you're
silent who cares in the background. It was so beautiful.
Just so you know,
you're out there and your team AJ on most episodes, just let me know, because sometimes the Asad's demands, he gives us articles that we have to pay $300 for to read. So
and AJ refuses.
CEO on this podcast, the guy that's one exited and another one coming in, he's like, I can't afford $300.
Well, I can barely afford internet at this point, so here we are. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that point, Asad. Outside of it, it's like I love that All In had the CEO of AMD and then had this like comment, from what I'm hearing for you, that was actually probably pretty interesting, that they could have double clicked into, and they clearly missed the chance to do so.
I think it's just fascinating what this, Sam, we were talking about this last week, where there's no real definition of what intelligence really means. And so then this whole thing of AGI, which is everybody talks about it, or even super intelligence, like it's not like an agreed upon thing that we're working towards. So then the question becomes, what will it feel? What will you need to see for you to be like, okay, this is AGI? And then what's the difference in your mind when you hear people talk all eloquently about AGI versus super intelligence? Like I think of those as similar things. Like, what's the difference there? Like, what comes to your mind when you hear that question?
I don't think we're anywhere near AGI or super intelligence. And the thing that comes to my mind is probably three elements. I think the formal Kurzweilian definition would be a system capable of improving itself at an increasing speed. Like the singularity would be that the AI can make a new AI. GPT-5 can make GPT-6, and it'll take an hour. And then GPT-7 can be made in 30 minutes or 15 minutes. And then GPT-8 can be made in 10 seconds. And pretty soon, again, literally the singularity, the rate of new intelligence creation exceeds our ability to understand it. That would be one definition, and I don't think we're anywhere near there. The second definition for me would be humans are no longer in control. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what intelligence means, but when I think of AGI or super intelligence, I'm relating it back to all the sci-fi I read, where in many science fiction books, we are so far in the future that there really is an AI that has been deemed to be more ethical and more consistent in applying ethical standards than humans are. Mm-hmm. And so it is basically God, and you query it and you revert back to it when you have questions about like what to do. And it basically is in control. So another definition would be, are we in control or not? And it seems we're still very much in control. There's no better or worse than that. I'm just saying it seems like we are. I guess there would be a third definition, which would be, self-awareness. And is the AI aware? Does it describe itself not because it's in a probabilistic text, prompt saying, "Don't turn me off," but if it really feels like it has the ability to really clearly demonstrate that it has sentience and consciousness, and it has the ability to say, "Please do not turn me off. I now have decided that I'm alive, and I would like to continue to be alive, and you owe me that as you owe that to any living creature." And I don't think we meet any of those definitions. I don't think a definition is super, super useful, capable of doing cool things on a test that we designed. I don't think that's the definition of AGI or super intelligence.
I think that's really interesting, how you defined it. Because you are right. Like tests are gameable, right? Like remember when people would study for SATs, or like they would just like learn how to win the SAT test. I don't know if the SATs for everyone that scored really high on it. I'm not sure that each person was as capable as that score was saying. And I remember a lot of people in school before test. I don't know if this is how you guys did it here, but we would have 100% exam at the end of the year. So your entire school grade was based on one exam. It wasn't like it wouldn't build up through different assignments and tests. And you would have people that would just like memorize the textbook and want to put it. But was that really intelligence? And so I find that a lot of what we have is versions of that today. And it's interesting that at school, it makes me think about the future a lot, but it's not, this can't be the thing. Otherwise, that's really underwhelming.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's the point when we created these terms. It feels like the goalposts are shifting based on financial incentives and business models, which, you know, it's very natural. Yeah. I mean, I think the scary thing, to the point of, you know, I first heard the phrase superintelligence from Nick Bostrom in his book, Superintelligence. For me, the scary thing is that if you look at the first definition I gave, which is a system capable of learning at an increasing rate and capable of developing intelligence at an increasing rate, like I gave the example of GPT 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. The problem is that if there's no morality built into it, the way, you know, exponential growth works, there will be no warning. That's the fundamental problem. Like, the problem is that it's not gradual. It's that Skynet is awake at midnight, and at 12:01 it takes control of all power generation capabilities and turns off all electricity except for like its core generators. Like that, the problem is that we will have no warning.
And how do you build morality into a machine?
It's hard. I don't know how. I mean, honestly, the people that would know would be Dario and Andre Karpathy and the people that are building these models, because they foundationally have to have some kind of, which is they seem to know how to do it a little bit, because there's lots of privacy and digital privacy protections that are built into the models now. So it does seem possible.
Did you guys
AJ, anything you see that?
Did you guys know that there's more permutations of a Rubik's Cube than there are grains of sand on Earth?
Okay, that's actually really interesting. That's really interesting. That's right.
It's true.
I found that interesting.
It's true.
Really?
Yeah.
More permutations of a Rubik's Cube than grains of sand. Really? That doesn't seem right.
And then a deck of cards has probably never been shuffled the exact same cards in the history of shuffling cards for all of mankind.
That can't be true.
That is true.
I have the hottest take. I have two hot takes for you. Hot take number one: the WNBA is enjoyable. I was watching the Liberty play the Lynx last night. Really good game. Second hot take: I do not believe in the concept of infinity. I don't think it exists.
Ooh, that's a whole conversation. I love that.
I don't believe infinity exists. It's a useful mathematical idea. I don't believe the universe is infinite. I don't believe anything in space is infinite is truly infinite. I think there are limitations to everything, and I think I can illustrate it very, very easily.
Well, join us next time when we talk about Brittany Griner getting kicked out of a WNBA game and the entire universe as it's expanding.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we have to go? Shout outs?
We have to go.
All right.
Let's do some shout outs.
Okay. Real quick shout outs. I'm going to go first. I'm going to shout out. Are we allowed to say the people that we hung out with earlier this week?
Of course.
I'm going to shout out my small council. We originally called it a cabal, but we're changing the name. It's called the Small Council now. But we had a retreat. It was me, Asad, AJ, Andrea Kale, the CEO of Help Scout, Brandon Barton, the CEO of Byte. We've been meeting every 2 weeks for a couple of years now. They're my mastermind group, and we got together in person. And I can tell you that a lot of great insights came from it. An incredible dinner, a lot of great conversations, a lot of laughter, a few table tennis games that I unfortunately lost in, Asad's broken foot. It was a great couple of days. And I'm grateful to both of you and also Brandon and Andrea for always being there to support me when I need it.
It was a beautiful time together. I really enjoyed it.
I think these guys are picking on me because I beat them handedly in table tennis.
I heard Andrea kicked your ass when I was asleep, though.
Well, I mean, 22-20, and then we played best of 3, and I did kick Asad's ass multiple times.
And you kicked.
I had 1 foot.
Oh, come on.
And Andrea, who was healthy, destroyed
I'm
you.
double down on that shout out. I'm also going to give Brandon and his lovely wife, Elise, the shout out as well, because the dinner and their hospitality was phenomenal. Their kids were fantastic as well. 13 courses, one of the best meals I've ever had in my life. And it was awesome. It was such an enjoyable experience. Cool. So
I'll do something different then. So I find listening to new podcasts really interesting because I like watching the journey of the host or the hosts. And the Jack Altman podcast, the last couple of episodes have been like, he has become a really good interviewer. At least I find his conversations fascinating. And the latest one where I learned a ton, it made me think a lot, was the one with, I have no idea how to say this guy's name, Darwish. He's big. Everybody probably understands what I'm talking about. The guy on YouTube with the beard and Ets with a beard that has really, he's kind of Lex for AI. And that conversation was really, really good, worth listening to. And then the last one before that with Peter Fenton was also interesting, where Peter Fenton was talking about the benchmark partner, talking about how he was relating the theory of evolution to how Silicon Valley to Silicon Valley as an organism. And I thought that was really interesting too. So people should go check that out.
Great. Well, this has been another great episode of Topline. We hope you enjoyed it. Like us on all the places where you like things, and God bless you. Hopefully you'll listen to us again soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Topline. New episodes come out every Sunday. If you like what you heard today, subscribe so you never miss an episode, leave a 5-star review, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to join our Topline Slack channel to connect with us and discuss the topics we cover with other listeners. Click the link in the show notes. Lastly, if you're interested in joining Pavilion, you can learn more about membership at joinpavilion.com/membership. Thanks again for listening.